Did you know that having too many options can actually kill your creativity? A study by psychologists at Columbia University found that people who had fewer choices were more likely to come up with creative solutions. In fact, when you limit your resources, you may find that your creativity skyrockets. Sounds strange, right? But it's true. Limitations often push us to think outside the box. And in a world that's obsessed with more, the idea of working within constraints might sound counterintuitive. But when it comes to creativity, less can truly be more. Whether it's a tight deadline or a small budget, these limits force you to get innovative and resourceful. In this video, we're going to explore how the world's most creative people, artists, designers, and innovators, use limitations to their advantage. You'll discover the surprising benefits of working with less and how rules, scarcity, and constraints can unlock your best ideas. Stick around, and you might just find that your next big breakthrough is hidden within a limit you've been avoiding. Chapter 1. The Power of Constraints. Why less is more. We often think that more is better when it comes to creativity. The more resources we have, the more ideas we can generate, right? Well, not exactly. Studies show that having too many options can actually stifle creativity. A famous study by psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper found that when people are given too many choices, they become overwhelmed and less likely to make decisions. But when limited options are presented, creativity thrives. The truth is, less can lead to more. When you have fewer resources, you're forced to think more creatively about how to use them. Consider how famous artists like Picasso or Van Gogh worked within the constraints of their time and materials. Picasso famously said, "The chief enemy of creativity is good sense." He didn't have all the tools we have today, but that didn't stop him from creating masterpieces. Even in the world of design, constraints can push boundaries. When Apple's Steve Jobs first launched the iPod, it was designed with only one button. The lack of complexity pushed the team to think differently, leading to a product that changed the tech world. You don't need to be an artist or a tech mogul to benefit from constraints. Think of your own projects. If you're working on something and you feel stuck, it might help to limit your choices. Try setting a time limit, restricting your tools, or narrowing your focus to just one aspect of the problem. In fact, research shows that having fewer choices increases the likelihood of original thinking. In a study by Teresa Amabile, a Harvard professor, people who worked under constraints produced more creative outcomes than those with unlimited resources. Amabile's research proves that constraints force you to dig deeper into your skills and ideas. Without them, your mind has too many options to filter through, slowing down the creative process. Chapter 2. Breaking free by embracing boundaries. Boundaries are often seen as barriers that limit us. But for creative people, boundaries are freedom. Setting clear boundaries helps you focus your energy in one direction instead of spreading yourself thin. When you create limits around your work, your mind isn't distracted by endless possibilities. Think of the legendary director Alfred Hitchcock. He often worked with limited sets and small budgets, but these restrictions forced him to become more creative with his storytelling techniques. Hitchcock once said, "There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it." By setting boundaries within his work, he could focus on the emotional intensity of the story instead of relying on big-budget special effects. It's a strategy that works even in everyday life. If you've ever tried to focus on a project with endless distractions, you know how hard it is to stay on track. That's where boundaries come in. When you set rules for your work, like only checking your email once a day or dedicating a set amount of time to brainstorming, you're freeing your mind from unnecessary distractions and sharpening your creative focus. Psychologist Dr. John Cunios, who specializes in creativity, argues that limitations foster creative thinking. He suggests that boundaries allow your brain to operate within a specific context, leading to more innovative solutions. For example, limiting the number of characters in a short story forces the writer to develop stronger, more unique characters with fewer words. This technique isn't just for artists or writers. It works for entrepreneurs, engineers, and even everyday problem solvers. When you have a specific goal in mind and a set of rules to follow, your mind starts searching for unconventional ways to reach that goal. It's like solving a puzzle. The tighter the puzzle pieces, the more you'll learn to think creatively to fit them together. Chapter 3. Limits as the playground of innovation. Limiting your resources doesn't just make your work more focused, it can make it more playful too. Think about playing a game. Games are fun because they come with rules, boundaries, and challenges. Similarly, when creative people work within limits, they approach their tasks like a game. The more rules they have to work with, the more exciting the challenge becomes. This playful approach to constraints has been proven to spark innovation. One study by the American Psychological Association found that when people were given restricted resources, they approached tasks with more ingenuity and joy. It's like the mind finds delight in figuring out how to make something work when the odds are stacked against it. A prime example of this is the invention of the Post-it note. The adhesive that makes the sticky part of the note was a mistake in the 1960s. But instead of tossing it aside, 3M scientist Spencer Silver worked within the limitation of this weak adhesive to find a new, creative use for it. The result was the birth of one of the most iconic office supplies in history. When you apply the playground of innovation mindset to your work, you free yourself from the pressure of perfection. You stop worrying about doing things the right way and start having fun with the process. When there are fewer options, your brain can start looking for quirky and creative solutions that you would never have thought of otherwise. Have you ever played a game with strict rules and found yourself getting more creative as you went? That's the magic of constraints. The famous composer Igor Stravinsky once said, "The more constraints one imposes, the more one frees oneself of the chains that shackled the spirit." In other words, the more limits you set, the more freedom you actually create in your work. This concept is particularly useful in the world of design thinking. Designers and engineers often work within strict parameters, be it budget, time, or materials, because it forces them to innovate. Without these boundaries, there is no true problem to solve. The limitation is the very thing that challenges you to find new, creative solutions. By embracing limitations, you allow yourself to explore possibilities that would otherwise remain hidden. So the next time you're feeling blocked, consider imposing some limits on yourself. The more you restrict yourself, the more your creative mind will flourish. Don't forget to subscribe to get more insights on how limits can boost your creativity and help you achieve your goals faster. Chapter 4. The Creative Framework. Using rules to fuel inspiration. Rules aren't just about restriction. In fact, rules can be the very thing that fuels creativity. When we set specific guidelines for our work, we are forced to stay within certain parameters, which helps focus our energy on finding the best possible solution within those limits. Think about it like a game of chess. The rules might seem rigid, but they create a structure where the game becomes more strategic, more interesting, and, ultimately, more creative. In the world of writing, many authors use the idea of constraints to spark new ideas. One famous example is the Oulipo movement, which was created in the 1960s by a group of French writers and mathematicians. They invented writing constraints, like creating poems without using the letter E. While this sounds strange, it led to some incredible, innovative works. Writer Georges Perrec's novel A Disparition, for example, is 300 pages long and entirely devoid of the letter E, yet it is a masterpiece of storytelling. In business, companies also use rules to their advantage. For instance, the car company Tesla has very strict limits when it comes to manufacturing time and costs. By setting rules and limits for production, the team focuses on improving efficiency and innovation. This focus on streamlining processes and staying within boundaries has helped Tesla become one of the most successful companies in the world. Rules help set a framework that can ignite fresh, unexpected ideas. In his book Creative Confidence, Tom Kelly discusses how limiting yourself to a specific tool, budget, or material can push your mind to look at problems from a new angle. This kind of restriction forces you to make the best use of what you already have rather than getting lost in possibilities. So, next time you feel lost in the creative process, try giving yourself a rule or a challenge. For example, you might decide that you can only use 3 colors or write a poem in under 30 minutes. These rules don't limit your creativity, they inspire it. Embracing constraints can give your work a sense of purpose and direction, leading to more inventive and original ideas. Make sure to subscribe for more tips on using rules and constraints to unlock your creative potential. Chapter 5. How embracing scarcity sparks genius. Scarcity is often seen as a negative, but when it comes to creativity, it can be a true catalyst for genius. When resources are limited, whether it's time, money, or materials, people are forced to make the most of what they have. This leads to resourcefulness and innovation. It's a principle that the world's most successful innovators understand well. For instance, Steve Jobs, when building Apple's first computers, worked with a very tight budget. His limited resources didn't stop him from creating products that changed the tech world. Instead, it pushed him to find cheaper, smarter ways to make things work. In a way, scarcity became a key to Apple's innovation and success. In his book The Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton Christensen talks about how companies often innovate the most when they face extreme constraints. He mentions how companies like Ford and Toyota developed breakthrough innovations not because they had unlimited resources, but because they were forced to make difficult decisions due to limited finances. This is the power of scarcity. It forces the mind to find new, creative ways to approach problems. The famous inventor Thomas Edison also saw scarcity as an opportunity. He once said, "To invent, you need a good imagination and a pile of junk." When Edison created the light bulb, he didn't have the best tools or materials, but he found a way to make them work. His ability to think creatively within the constraints of limited resources led to one of the most important inventions in history. You can apply this concept to your own life too. Whether you're working on a tight deadline or have a limited budget, use it as an opportunity to be more inventive. Scarcity can be your secret weapon, pushing you to think outside the box and come up with solutions that you wouldn't have considered if you had unlimited resources. Chapter 6. The Art of Limiting Choices. From overload to overdrive, we live in a world with endless choices, from which phone to buy to how to spend our time. This constant barrage of options can leave us feeling paralyzed and stuck in decision overload. But what if limiting our choices could lead to more creativity and better outcomes? A study conducted by psychologist Barry Schwartz revealed that having too many choices leads to anxiety and dissatisfaction. He found that when people are faced with endless options, they often struggle to make decisions, which leads to a decrease in creativity and productivity. On the other hand, when choices are limited, people become more focused and effective in their decisions. This is why limitations are so powerful for creativity. Take, for example, the process of creating art. The best artists often work with a limited color palette or a set of specific materials. This restriction forces them to get more creative with their use of what they have. It's the same concept that applies to problem solving in business, design, and even everyday life. When you limit your options, you free yourself from the stress of overthinking. You stop worrying about what else might be out there and start focusing on the task at hand. This is why creative challenges like NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, where writers are encouraged to write a novel in 30 days, work so well. The pressure of limited time and resources pushes writers to just write and not overthink the details. This approach has been shown to increase productivity and creativity. In one experiment by researchers at Stanford, participants who were given a limited set of tools to solve a problem came up with more creative and effective solutions than those who had unlimited resources. The limitation forced them to think differently, to find new and innovative solutions. Limiting choices also helps you avoid decision fatigue, which can drain your energy and creativity. When you simplify the decision-making process, your mind has more energy to focus on the creative aspects of the task rather than being bogged down by endless choices. So, if you ever feel stuck or overwhelmed, consider limiting your choices. Set boundaries on your options and see how that can help you become more focused and creative. By working within constraints, you might just unlock new levels of creativity you didn't know you had. Don't forget to subscribe for more creative tips that will help you take your ideas to the next level.